Hi there and welcome to this video. In a previous video I've looked at a quick review of 2019. You know, obviously the second half of 2018 with the launch of a plethora of new mirrorless bodies set us up for a really interesting 2019 where a lot of the brands were really starting to build out their ecosystems. In this video I'm going to just have a think about and a look at what we might see from Nikon in the mirrorless space in 2020 and the market in a slightly wider way. So if we start with the camera bodies, then it'll be interesting 2020 because, as I say, the Z6 and Z7 were launched in the middle of 2018, and if we look at the cycle drum beats for the release of new mirrorless bodies, then Sony tends to sit at a 1 to 2 year drum beat, whilst Nikon tends to sit traditionally at a 2 to 3 year drum beat. So it'll be interesting to see whether Nikon starts to move towards the Sony drum beat and perhaps moves from a 3 year drum beat to a 2 year drum beat. Will we get the Z6S or the Z7S launched in 2020, or will it be 2021? What will they have? Will they just have a faster processor which allows for quicker and more accurate autofocus, something that some people have found to be an issue with the first generation Z6 and Z7? Will they go even further and actually introduce a second card slot? I think that one's slightly unlikely, but I could certainly see an incremental update to the Z6 or Z7 in either 2020 or possibly more likely in 2021. But irrespective of whether it's 2020 or 2021, Nikon are going to have to continue to update the firmware. They've been slightly slower than people have anticipated in 2019, with the release of the version 2.20 only coming out in late December, when it was scheduled to be much earlier in the year. Obviously that firmware giving the CF Express card compatibility and the ProRes RAW export capability, which perhaps people had anticipated to be a very simple functionality extension to the Z6 and Z7, but now we find requires a return to the service centre to be authorised and a fee paid with it. How will firmware continue to be updated in 2020? Well, obviously the CF Express, the version 2.20 of the firmware, only allows for the Sony branded Type B CF Express cards. There are others on the market. Whether those will need a further firmware upgrade is yet to be seen, but it would be nice to see Nikon continuing to refine the eye autofocus, the autofocus in low light, the focus algorithms in general, to upgrade the functionality or the capability and speed of the camera. There is obviously a limit to how far they can go, because my guess is the processor in the Z6 and Z7 is probably working at capacity, because we do see certain instances, or people have reported, where they've got a lot of functionality turned on, the focus speed does drop very slightly. And that may require the incremental upgrade of a Z6S or a Z7S to upgrade the processor. Now at the moment we have no known firmware releases scheduled for 2020, so it will be interesting to see as and when Nikon do drop additional firmware. And this might give us an indication of the drumbeat for the body replacement. We've obviously had the Z50 released in late 2019, and this was Nikon's first foray into the APS-C crop sensor market. And it'll be interesting to see how they continue to develop that franchise. Will they supplement the Z50 with a Z40 and a Z30 below it in the range? They've pitched the Z50 at being a D7000 equivalent. The D7000, there's room above it possibly for a Z60. And it'll be interesting to see how Nikon release more DX lenses for those bodies. Equally, if you move above the Z6 and Z7, there's the rumoured Z8 or Z9, we're not quite sure what they'll call it, which will probably have the 61 megapixel sensor in it. That's scheduled to be released in Q1 of 2020, or should I say rumoured to be released in Q1 of 2020, and is likely to have dual card slots, I would have thought. So if we move from the camera bodies to the lenses now, Nikon have changed their approach to their roadmap. In the early days, they had a roadmap which showed which lenses, or at least the quantity of lenses, they were planning to release by year. In the latest release of that roadmap, they've really dropped all mention of dates. This could be because, as we've seen, they've held their dates pretty well until we've got to perhaps what their schedule was, the 70-200 Z-mount f2.8 lens, which was due to be released in 2019, but we haven't seen, and will therefore likely come out in 2020. If we make an educated guess around the lenses that are going to be released in 2020, well, they'd already declared the 20mm f1.8 on their previous roadmap as being a 2020 lens, as with the 50mm f1.2 lens and the 14-24 f2.8 lens, both of those being faster glass, which some professionals have been calling out for. And if we add those three to the 70-200, we end up with 4 S-line Z-mount lenses. We're likely to see some additional DX lenses, I would have thought, to build out that range, perhaps as they add additional bodies to the range. But will we see an additional S-line lens? There's a gap in the range at the moment for a macro lens, so something like the 105mm micro lens that's on the roadmap could come out in 2020. Any which way, by the end of 2020, we'll be starting to see quite an extensive lineup of lenses around the Z-series, albeit not as extensive as the F-mount lenses that have built up over the decades. So there's some way to go for Nikon as they move out from 2020 into 2021. Let's also look at the ecosystem as we did in our 2019 review. I think we'll see a continued rate of innovation in this area, whether it's around gimbals, bags, tripods, mics, that really play to the size and weight benefits of mirrorless cameras and also their hybrid nature. The difference probably in 2020 will be that we will start to see some really quite refined products coming out, as during 2019, people were getting used to how they started to use mirrorless cameras, perhaps if they were transitioning from DSLRs, how many lenses they carried, did they reduce their kit, or did the size and weight benefit allow them to carry more kit? What we'll probably see is, for example, in the space of bags, whether we'll see a continued miniaturization or compactness being built into those, or whether the space that's freed up by cameras will be used to carry other gear. So I think it's going to be an interesting journey as we carry on through 2020 with much innovation, if not more innovation in the ecosystem space than probably in the cameras and lenses. We'll probably see more CF Express cards coming to the market. However, is there really a use case at the moment for the 4x data transfer compared to the XQD card, particularly if you've just upgraded all your cards when you bought your Z6 or Z7 to XQD from SD cards? So a challenge for the manufacturers there. When we look at software, I think we'll see a continued increased drumbeat from the likes of Adobe in terms of Lightroom and Photoshop. So in 2019 we saw 5 upgrades to Lightroom. I'd hope they'd continue at that pace. I hope we see some more functionality being built in there that both makes the post-processing more efficient but also opens up new opportunities. So whilst 2020 will, I'm sure, have some really exciting moments from a hardware perspective, I think we'll see a continued evolution as we did in 2019, where the big progress is made up of a lot of small steps brought together in combination. What do you think we're going to see in 2020? What would you like to see in 2020? Give me your thoughts in the comments below. If you've enjoyed this video, hit subscribe, hit the notification bell. It'd be great to have you on the journey through 2020 as we look at how the market changes around mirrorless cameras and in particular these Z-series cameras.